right. So we are recording the session today, so just so you know, so that people are able to look at the replay. And it also is going live on LinkedIn. So for those of you who were here yesterday, welcome back. To those new faces that I have not seen yet today, welcome to a group of kick-ass women who have really been so insightful um, and inspiring to me also through this journey together. This is the first time I'm doing this, and I'm doing this because I want to expose more women to concepts of feminist leadership in an era of war and conflict and radicalism and domestic extremism and hate and all sorts of stuff. So I really am passionate about training what I call the feminist army to be able to withstand and also rebel against in the next 4 years. And I also want to support women to rise to the top of whatever field they're in. Um, so before we get started on today's topic, I just want to remind you that the Women's Leadership Challenge, which is the year-long cohort that Leslie, Abby, and Meg have all taken, has officially opened for enrollment. It starts in February. There's two cohorts. One is in person in DC, and one is a virtual cohort. It is for women who are already in leadership roles. This is not an entry-level program, so you have to have leadership experience to be considered. Women who are looking to navigate a transition in your life, you might be looking to craft your legacy or wondering, what is the impact that I want to have on the world? If you want to step into your full potential and join a community of incredible change-making women. It's also for women who want to become a thought leader, write a book, run for office, start their nonprofit, step up their game, get to the C-suite, or if you're in the government at that SES position, or just want to learn how to lead in a way that is in alignment with their values and with feminist values. All of those are the things that you'll do in the Women's Leadership Challenge. So it is a year-long container, as I mentioned, for coaching and networking that helps women reach the next level of their careers and define their unique leadership style and create social change and also adapt to change and have a soft place to land with a bunch of awesome women as, the world goes like this, as they say, the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. So to learn more about getting a seat inside one of these cohorts, you can schedule a call with me, and Meg will put that link in the chat, and we'll see if it's a fit for you and how we can help you fund the program if that's something that you need to figure out. All righty, so let's get started. And hi, Gabby. Gabby and I both spoke today at a leadership conference. She was awesome, and I was the humbly had to follow her. I had to.
Oh, I thought you were stunning, just so you know. I felt like, oh, it's a good thing.
I had to throw in my Syria and Venezuela geopolitical knowledge just to differentiate myself. But we did speak at a conference today about leadership and love, and looking at love as kind of an inspiration of leadership, which I think fits really well with our topic today, which is about feminist leadership. And we do have a special guest today, Abby Allen, who is a graduate of the Women's Leadership Challenge. So where I want to start today is to ask you a question. I want you to think of a leader who you have really admired or you currently admire. Think of a leader that you really admired or you currently admire. What was it or what is it about them that you admire? Think about that and you can put it in the chat. What is it about them that you admire? All right, so much good stuff here. Some of the themes that I'm seeing, overcoming adversity, and a rough start. And, part of that is also leading people through adversity. Magnetism and ability to connect with anyone. So that ability to really connect on a deep and meaningful level with people where they feel that authenticity. Authenticity again, genuine, open, honest, fair. I love this part, Abby, treated people as real, whole people, not just resources to manage. One aspect of feminist leadership, I used to work in tech like Abby, and I always hated how people were called users, the users of a tech product. And it really bothered me because it felt so depersonalized and dehumanized. And I kept saying, like, these are real people that are using the product. These aren't just like little lemmings, which I think is something in the tech world that I don't know, some people don't get. I'm really incensed about Zuckerberg, so don't get me started on him. Um, Ability to be with challenges and speak from tact and truth. Beautiful, Gabby. Michelle Obama, not giving an F, but still doing what's right. Absolutely. So values-based leadership, crafting a vision and also delegating within that vision, willing to be challenged. Uh, Leslie, why don't I have you come off mute? I want to hear more about Mia Motley.
Okay, yes. So Mia Motley, of course, I'm from the Caribbean, but she is the Prime Minister of Barbados in the Caribbean. And she's an excellent orator, excellent orator. She is, she oftentimes when she how it works at CARICOM, the Caribbean Community, which is the regional body for the 14 Caribbean states. And when she chairs that, she is a very strategic thinker. And of course, Haiti is on the forefront always of CARICOM. So she's given excellent recommendations. Also, she's an excellent orator. And she was also voted, during the pandemic, she was voted as one of the top woman who handled the COVID pandemic strategically in her country. Also, she doesn't push back. She's from a small Caribbean country. And when you see a lot of times where she pushes back on journalists when they ask these hard pressing questions about, when they ask her about, oh, China is, takes over all of Barbados. And then she says, oh, well, China owns half the reserves in the US. And when they said, oh, what about corruption in your country? And she goes, well, why is it every time you speak to leaders of developed nations, you talk about corruption? She said, the last time I checked, there's corruption all over. So she pushes back, and she's an excellent orator. Oftentimes when she's speaking at the General Assembly, the UN General Assembly, she gets, applause and talks a lot about climate and other issues. So she's excellent. She's
Thanks,
somebody
Leslie.
I aspire to, yes.
So I hear about just pushing back and also pushing back on kind of westernized, kind of calling out those journalists for having these very Western kind of thoughts about the developing world. It's interesting. I was, well, public speaking is actually one of the gaps that I would like to help fill because I have a podcast. I'm a speaker. So for the alums that are here, the next program I'm going to be rolling out for my alums, other than the masterminds, is called the Thought Leader, which is going to have a heavy, heavy emphasis on public speaking training, because I see so many of you leave the program and you're super empowered and you're ready to be in the spotlight, and I want to train you to speak. So just heads up for the alums that are here. But yeah, being an orator, like being able to communicate that message in a way that resounds with people, and to have what's called emotional and logical transference. They're getting the point, but they're also coming away with an emotional experience from hearing you speak. So that's exceptionally important. Let's hear from Jumena.
Hi. Um,
See you.
yeah, hi, sorry. I'm on my phone. My
Okay,
kids are also doing online classes right now, so
that's okay.
um no, I think for me, someone, there's, people then tend to have, like, I've been in my experience, tend to have a vision of, what they want to do, but then they're not inclusive. They if you're going to uplift people and build the future generation of leaders, have a vision, but then also, I think someone mentioned delegate. Also include them in your vision and how to achieve that vision. And it should be, like I said, I think inclusive of just not just different perspectives of how to achieve that vision, but also different generations. I think people, I'm kind of, I'm about to turn 45, but there's, I want to hear from the fresh graduate, the 22-year-old, but I also want to hear from someone who's 60 and at the peak of their career, or they've been in their career for a very long time and they have experience and they can reflect back. So I think that type of leader is what I qualities in a leader I would look for and I would admire.
Thanks, Jabita. And then lastly, Gabby. Am I pronouncing it right? Is it Gabby or Gaby? Gaby.
Gaby. Yeah,
Okay.
Gaby.
Apologies for that.
Yeah, so I was actually, Michelle Obama was one of the ones I was referencing. Hillary Clinton was another. RBG, love her. And I also love Mia Motley, though I don't know as much about her, but still, I think the ability to be forthright, not rattled, recognize, when I say speak your truth with tact, right? You don't have to be a jerk about it, but you can really be able to have those challenging conversations. Recently we saw Kamala, right, having to certify the election, and some interesting commentary on LinkedIn that came with that. So those are all, qualities that I think are worth admiration.
Yeah, thanks, Gaby. And it's the last in the last year, something that I've really come to realize is how many people really suck at courageous conversations. How many adults, including myself. And one of as we get into feminist leadership, one of the values that I really think as part of feminist leadership is to practice what you preach. So as I've been coaching people on crucial conversations, courageous conversations, honest conversations, feedback, whatever it is, part of I've started to notice in my own life, where am I shying away from having a conversation that I need to have and letting it just fester? How do you approach that a tactful way? Because it's uncomfortable. It's not comfortable to have courageous conversations. That's why it takes courage. And you have to plan them, and they take tact, and you can't control how someone responds. But I think that I've seen that as a really critical gap, especially in cultures that call themselves super nice and inclusive and everyone loves each other. And often that's a cover for a workplace where people are not having courageous conversations, and not all is what it seems. So, okay, so these are all great. And a lot of these really integrate into feminist leadership. So what the heck is feminist leadership? Everybody always says feminine, and I bristle. It is not the same as feminine leadership. I know some of you have probably seen my TED Talk. When I gave my TED Talk back in 2020, I was looking more at women's leadership and the studies around women's leadership. There are studies that show that women are more likely to, and we'll look at this, we're more likely to be able to emotionally express, for example, because we are raised to express our emotions. It's not seen as weak, etc. But I think that femininity and what that means is largely ambiguous and means different things to different people, especially after having a lot of gay women in my course. Frankly, what does feminine mean there? It's different. And so it is not feminine leadership. And feminine or women's leadership does not have a set of values. And when we think about aspiring to a North Star of leadership, we need to know what values we're prescribing to. So if you say to, Beth and Marina and Elizabeth, be more of a woman leader or be more feminine, what does that mean, right? Versus, the principles and behaviors we're going to look at of collaboration and inclusion and co-design and human centricity and start where you stand. Those are principles and values that you could point to and actually make actionable versus be more like a woman. What does that mean? Nobody knows. So that is where I bristle at the term feminine leadership. Some people might disagree with me. And I know some people believe in masculine and feminine polarities, and I think there's some stuff there. But I think that as leaders, we need to look at values and what are the values that underpin our leadership, and looking at feminist values alongside our own values in our life, and how do we combine those, and then how do we practice those. So one fundamental, whenever anybody asks me, if you have, bar conversation, so your leadership, like, what's your one tip for being a better leader? And I always say, people want to feel seen, recognized, valued, and heard. Seen, recognized, valued, and heard. It's not that hard. It's really not that hard. But the number of leaders who do it is like very, 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 very small. So that, I think, underpins some of feminist leadership. Some of it's also generational in terms of, if we look at Gen Z and millennials, people want to have autonomy. That's a psychological need. They want to be able to choose. They don't want to be given something because someone assumes that it's for, that's what they want. We want to be able to choose. You don't walk into a restaurant and have them come out and go, oh, well, you looked like you wanted chicken parm, so I brought it out for you. Like, no, I want to look at the menu and make a choice. Even if you wanted chicken parm, even if they were absolutely right, you want to make that choice. And so part of it is, how do we enable people to have a choice while still, as the leader, helping them be aware of where the final decisions lie, and what decisions are they able to have a say in, and what decisions are going to be outside of them. You want to include people as much as you can, but also you can't include people, in every single decision, or it becomes a mess. So this is, I think, one really fundamental piece of this. Abby, before I keep going, do you want to just make this a little more conversational, since I feel like you already have things to say because I'm looking at your face and I know you.
Oh, I mostly it's just that I agree with everything you're saying. And sorry, I was like listening to my daughter in the other room who's got the volume way too loud on her tablet. So, but I'm happy to weigh it. I mean, I think that what I had mentioned in is the leader who I really aspired to be like. One of my earliest mentors in my career. He embodied a lot of this, even though he's not feminine by any look or feel or traditional definition of the word, right? Like, he's a very large, burly, bearded man who still treated people like real people, who made every single person on that team feel seen, recognized, valued, and heard, and advocated for every single one of us. So I do think that you're spot on, right? It's about, how do you embody these values, no matter who you are, no matter what skin or body you're in. We can all have this way of leadership that has been proven to make everyone more successful. It's not about being more girly at work and leaning in. It's
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I didn't mean to kind of bring you in at the last second, Abby, but we'll keep going. Let's do some of the principles, and then we'll bring Abby back in a more formal way, since she is our guest for the day. So the other thing to be aware of is that, and this is where, when I started talking about leadership, and I was thinking, who am I to talk about leadership, right? Even my mom was like, you're like 30 something. What do you know about leadership? And, what I've noticed, and I mentioned this today when I was speaking, is the geopolitical shifts and the trends and the changes that are happening. And that the old style of leadership, I realized that when I went to Tufts and I took a leadership class, every single person we looked at was a white man, which there's a lot of great white male practitioners, but it's not all that there is. And I realized that women weren't being captured in terms of how they led, and especially activists weren't being captured in terms of how they led. And so there's a really great book called New Power, who I had the privilege to meet the author at Bellagio. And they talk about this old style of leadership, which is very transactional, which is usually fear-based. And that's this, I have Putin riding on his horse with no shirt on. The leaders that hoard power. If you think even back to Stalin, and how Stalin literally had all of his people that were right under him murdered because he was paranoid that they were going to steal his power because he was so desperate to hoard power. There's a top-down decision making. So people that are at the bottom or the middle have no say ever at the top. Everything comes down from the top and there's no through line. There's only a few people that are involved in that room, that decision-making room. And usually, especially in a geopolitical context, they're not necessarily the ones who actually are involved in the community to be able to see the change through that needs to be seen. So for example, a peace process, you often see in peace processes, there's like rarely women there. And the likelihood of a peace process actually being sustainable is much higher when you have women as part of a peace process, and yet they keep leaving women out of peace processes. People users and this command and control style of you do this because I tell you to. There's a system of rewards and punishments. So if you do this, you get a carrot. If you don't do this, you get a stick. And it's very much about extrinsic motivation. So here's, these external rewards or these external punishments that will be levied on you if you do or don't do what it is that I or we at the top want. Other aspects of it is avoiding difference, right? This anti-DEI, anti-woke, anti-gender, every identity is very much an old power style based in fear of difference, of a threat of power being usurped, of not knowing how to manage different people that have different needs and experiences, because it's much easier to lead a homogeneous group that it's just like you than it is to lead a very diverse place with lots of different types of people. Old power leaders, they need to be right versus they try to get it right. It's money is usually the number one priority, GDP, or the value of a company or the share price, and they're fear-based. So those are some of the kind of old power leaders. Who else, when you think of old power leaders, comes to mind? You can put it in the chat. Who else comes to old power leaders? You could just put it in the chat. So the new power leaders, and this really is going towards feminist leadership. New power leaders are they're about sharing power. So about how do I, and in my TED Talk, I talk about giving power to, sharing power with, and activating the power within. So it's not about holding on to power, but it's about how do I distribute power while still maintaining my power. You don't want to give it all away so people step on you, right? But how do I share it in a way that empowers people, which then inspires their intrinsic motivation and makes them respect and value you as a leader? It's more about collaboration. How do we collaborate together and come up with a solution together? There's people involved, there's multiple stakeholders involved. It's a participatory framework. Again, not every decision can be participatory, but it shouldn't be all top-down decision making because people won't have a voice or choice, and then they will be pissed and they will leave. Treating people as whole people and individuals, human centricity, human-centered design, designing around a real person with real needs. From a tech perspective, that book, Abby, about that you recommended to me was so good about designing for edge cases and not only designing for a homogeneous group, but designing for all different types of people. Co-design, when I worked at a virtual reality company on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we would actually work with the HR teams to create a script and to design a workplace in VR that looked like Google, that looked like Amazon, that looked like Barclays. And we would work with the HR team to create a script that based on real circumstances that happened there. So at the end of the VR experience, it would say, this is a real situation that happened at Barclays or whatever the company was. And it was much more real because we worked in tandem with them than us putting our vision or our thoughts on them. From a co-design perspective, I think I mentioned this yesterday, from the humanitarian angle, our alum, Rachel Cadell Monroe, working with a community in Peru to design domestic violence interventions, versus, Doctors Without Borders designing it at headquarters in the US or London and being like, here you go, here's your like solution we came up with without any of your participation. You don't get it right that way. New power leaders and feminist leaders embrace difference, and they see the value in different types of people, and how, all of the statistics still show like innovation is much higher because you have different ideas at the table. You avoid groupthink. You have different ideas. It's more about getting it right versus needing to be right, and that ego. Triple bottom lines: peace, profit, planet. Right. I also, the ESG backlash, I don't really understand all that much, because it's just, we shouldn't be destroying our planet. I mean, we just shouldn't. Like, what's happening in LA is just horrible. And my heart is with anyone who's affected by that here. And the use of empathy over fear. And that, as someone said earlier, having those meaningful connections with people and showing that you care about them as a person, and you care where it is they're coming from. You care about, you're able to put yourself in their shoes and imagine what that must feel like. You're able to understand that people have different lived experiences than you, so that, you're, as a leader, it's like, okay, well, you're late to work. Well, maybe this person can't afford a car and they're taking the metro and 3 buses because their car broke down. They're able to understand different lived experiences, and your own privilege, and understand how your privilege might play into things. All of those things are really important. No problem, Juliana. I'll post the replay tonight. There's also self-awareness and leading from your heart. And, I was talking today about Venezuela and Syria, how in both cases, in Venezuela and Syria, we saw fear-based leaders who, well, Maduro unfortunately did not fall, but people did vote for the opposition candidates, which was Maria Corina Machado behind Edmundo Gonzalez, who was the actual candidate. And the tallies all showed that people are sick of Maduro, who is a classic top-down, fear-based leader. And the same thing in Syria, where the Assad regime finally fell after 50 years, because of people being sick of it and sick of violence and fear and living in this culture of control. And also, in both cases, economic collapse also led to their demise. Once they had no money to bribe people with or to pay people, their power was gone. And that's the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. When you're helping people, when you're inspiring somebody to be internally motivated, that's sustainable, versus giving them extrinsic rewards. That's not sustainable in the long term, because that will run out. So let's skip this. So the other thing to be, aware of is, this course, like, men could have come. Not all women are one way, and not all men are another. There's plenty of feminist men, and there's plenty of anti-feminist women. Amy Coney Barrett, helping overturn reproductive rights and, causing all these deaths among women who don't have a right to abortion or reproductive care anymore. That is not feminist. She is not a feminist. And I got really angry when someone wrote an article in Politico about how, because she was successful, she was somehow a feminist. And that's not the same thing. Being successful does not mean you're a feminist. Being a feminist is about living by feminist values, like we're starting to speak about. And men can be absolute, like Obama, total feminist. Trudeau, unfortunately, has gone to his demise, but he was one of the first countries to implement feminist foreign policy as a male leader in his country. And then the other thing too to be aware of, right, is that in this conference today, someone asked me about deconstructing your inner patriarchy, which is a class in the Women's Leadership Challenge. But he asked me, how does it apply to men? And, we spoke about how men are having a little bit of an identity crisis now, because being the protector and provider was such an identity for men for so long, that if women out-earn them, were more educated than men now, we have more college degrees, more graduate degrees, that they're like, what is their role? There's obviously also anger about like toxic masculinity and feeling like, just because you're a white man doesn't mean you're a toxic man, which is completely correct. But I think patriarchy as it exists, when there's this study called the Man Box by Gary Barker at Equimundo, formerly called Promundo, which showed that the more that men prescribe to traditional old school masculine ideas, things like being self-sufficient, not asking for help, looking tough, being always like physically groomed and perfect, the more that they subscribe to the man box, the higher their likelihood of depression, of suicidal ideation, of suicide. So patriarchy it's not just about us liberating ourselves, right? It's also about realizing that when we create a more holistic world that appreciates men have emotions, newsflash, and also appreciates that women can earn and don't have to be the stay-at-home parent or whatever that is. It patriarchy dehumanizes men too, and when we think about violence, like the in many countries, men are the first that go to war. Like they are on the front lines of battle. And that, seeing the number of people that get killed in war, and there's still more women that die, but there's a lot that I think men are dealing with. And I mentioned it in the first class about young men and how they swung towards Trump this time and what is going on. And I think a lot of that has to do with a sort of identity crisis about their role in society and who they, what the role is they have to play. I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts on that before we move on. I don't like talking for too long. Do you have any thoughts on that? Just out of curiosity. Okay, we'll move on. And if you have thoughts, just put it into the chat. Okay, so when we think about feminism and feminist leadership, right? It's all of the things that we just talked about, which are new leaders. But the other thing that really underpins feminist leadership is pushing against traditional power structures and trying to redistribute power in a way that is equitable to all different types of people. It is ending things like sexual violence, or at least ameliorating it, getting policies passed that, I mean, if anything didn't make you shocked, I mean, the Giselle trial was just unreal, that like we live in a society where a man can like let men rape his wife while he drugs her. I mean, it's just wild. It's so horrendous. Like that should not happen ever in society. And I mean, that case, there was some justice brought, but most rape cases don't even come to a trial because they're so unwinnable. Because it's always a he said, she said, and it happened in private, and there's no proof, there's no cameras, and most of them don't even end up getting prosecuted. So feminist leaders really think about fairness and equity and class and think about how do you lift up, if you can lift up a gay, Roma, handicapped, lower class, refugee, like you're lifting up everybody. So we always have to think about like, how do we get to those, how do we lift up everyone in a way that is also intersectional, as I think it was Julia mentioned yesterday. That's not just about white women. And when I first started teaching this course, I had some women of color say feminism isn't just about white women, because there was this, for a long time it was led by white women. It was about white women's rights, and it wasn't intersected with the civil rights movement. And I think more than ever, we need to work together, because all of these systems of oppression are interlinked. They're not separate from one another. They're interlinked, and they work together to keep all of these different groups down. So if we think about feminist leadership, right? Let's, Abby, can you read this out loud for us?
Sure. People with a feminist perspective and vision of social justice, individually and collectively transforming themselves to use their power, resources, and skills in non-oppressive, inclusive structures and processes to mobilize others, especially other women, around a shared agenda of social, cultural, economic, and political transformation for equality and the realization of human rights for all.
So what words, we put it in the chat, what words stand out to you in there? So much in this one definition. What words stand out to you? Social justice, yep. Shared agenda, inclusive, non-oppressive. Transformation, right? You're transforming yourself and transforming others. Human rights for all. Mobilization. It's such a dynamic, it's such a dynamic quote, but I think it represents what's next, which is, let's actually go here, which is about challenging hidden and invisible power. And in the Women's Leadership Challenge, in our class on creating institutional change, we do what's called a power analysis, where we're looking at what is direct power, what is invisible power, what is hidden power. So, and how do you counteract those types of power effectively? It's called a power analysis. And figure out how do you create democratic forms of power that are more equitable and more distributive and do keep people accountable. We're not going to have time to go through all of these today, but this is a little bit of the framework, and this is in the feminist leadership book I'm writing. I kind of have a chapter on each of these. And I'll tell you too, part of why I started this work is because there's not that much out there on it that I found. There was one book I read on feminist leadership, and it was just not good. It was like, here's all the problems in the world. It was like class one, which was really depressing, but it wasn't a whole lot about what feminist leadership actually meant. And a lot of this I've kind of gathered from different places and my own interviews and working with some of the amazing women on this call to formulate what that means. There isn't one definition. I think it's evolving and changing as we speak. I'll focus on one, and then the others are ones that if you do decide to join the Women's Leadership Challenge, we go through these in depth. My favorite one is start where you stand. And start where you stand, I love Greta Thunberg because she just went to Parliament, put up a sign, and she said, hey, there's a climate emergency. Like the climate, the planet is burning. What are you doing about it? And it's so like anyone could do that. And she didn't have to be the CEO. She didn't have to be the representative to the United Nations for Norway or Sweden. She just, sat there with a sign. And all of a sudden she was like Forrest Gump with people behind her. And the next thing you know, she is speaking at the UN. By the way, her speech where she goes, blah, 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 climate neutrality, blah, 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 is amazing. She just mocks everyone at the UN in the most amazing way. This is a principle that I think especially we need to teach people as well is how do you start where you stand, especially in the next 4 years where so many people feel powerless. What can you influence? What do you control, right? What's in your locus of control, and where can you have influence? And how can you deploy that influence in a way that's strategic, that goes beyond just attending a protest, which tomorrow we're going to talk a lot with Mariana Diaz-Kraus about how do you make change. So with that, I am going to give it over to Abby Allen, our special guest. Abby, let me introduce you. So Abby Allen, and also an alum of the Women's Leadership Challenge, is the founder and CEO of Gluestick, an app that inspires kids to learn, create, and experiment using supplies they already have at home. She has 15 plus years of engineering and product management experience, and her journey to founding Gluestick includes many achievements, including temporarily misplacing every cross-country aircraft over Utah. I need to hear more about that. Grinding Google AdSense support queues to a halt, becoming an unexpected expert in international SMS regulations, and almost forgetting to exercise her options after her first successful exit. These days, Abby combines her technical expertise with lessons learned as a mom to build a product she wants her family to use and the corporate culture she wants her kids to work in someday. Her leadership philosophy embraces the chaos of building something new while creating space for everyone to learn from inevitable mishaps. Abby, would love to hear some lessons that you'd like to share about feminist leadership.
Oh goodness, that's such a broad prompt. Just I think one, for me, you're just talking about starting where you stand. I want to give kudos to every single one of you who are starting where you are standing right now by being here, right? Like sometimes it's just so hard to take that moment and be like, I know I want to be better, right? I know that there is something within me. There are values I want to be expressing. There's good I want to be doing in the world, and I'm not doing it. I don't know how to get to where I want to go. And I think that going through the Women's Leadership Challenge, and as I look back at, my career so far, I think those moments when I was hungry to learn more, those were the moments that I had the most impact eventually, right? So like I want you all to like think about like where you are right now and realize like you have that hunger too. Now, what are you going to do with it, right? Like, how are you going to take that and change that and make it into what it is that you want to put out into the world? So that's my number one kind of like challenge for all of you, because I know that you've got greatness inside every single one of you. We all do, right? That's a part of, I think, just being human, right? It's like we all have this intrinsic drive to leave a mark and leave a legacy. And to me, the aspects of a great leader are recognizing that drive in other people and helping them find it and nurture it and make sure that you're bringing other people along up with you as you pursue yours. Excuse me just a moment. My dog is scratching at my door. I'm going to let her in before she ruins my office.
So one of the things I love about Abby, by the way, is Abby's just humanity and authenticity, which includes dogs. It includes
Yes.
adorable. I loved when your daughter came to our mastermind group and then decided, remember that? And then she decided to stand up against her boss. I was very
Oh
proud.
yeah, with Indigo. Yes, yes. Yeah, she she's still doing great and she's still speaking up. So, yeah, I have so much pride in my girls. Um, yeah, I guess like I don't know what more do you want to hear?
Well, you were a member of the Women's Leadership Challenge. What stood out for your experience for you, especially I mean, what's interesting about you, Abby, is I kind of always knew you were going to be a founder, but you kept going into these jobs and then like doing great things, but always kind of being unfulfilled. So how did it help you to become like to get to Gluestick? Like
Oh,
when did
yeah.
that turn?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, about a year and a half ago now, not quite. I was in a job at a company who on paper sounded like it was going to be amazing. They have a kick-ass woman CEO who is unapologetic about standing up for pay equality and, flexibility in the workforce and all sorts of things that like we as women need to be more successful. But in practice, when you were down at the bottom of the totem pole, it was a lot of good talk, but it still wasn't what I wanted from my career. It's the part where I was learning all the international SMS, right? And to me, like I am a very I don't want to say regimented, but like I want to live my values. I want to know that the organizations that I am working for and with and under are as ethical as possible. And when I see potential ethical qualms, I have a really big challenge with that. So this particular company was breaking many SMS international regulations every single day, and no one gave a hoot. And much of my job was going to my boss, who was trying very hard to climb a corporate ladder, and say, like, we are at risk of having every single one of the people who depend on our software be left without a solution because we are breaking laws in Canada, we are breaking laws across Europe, we're breaking all of this law. Um, Oh goodness, dog. Sorry. It's her playtime and she's hungry. Let me just text my husband and tell him to grab your dog. Uh, so I eventually got fed up, right? Like there was a night where I realized I was taking all of this stress home with me, and I had blown up at my family one too many times. And I didn't want to be that person anymore. I didn't want to be the person that was fighting hard at work, but couldn't live those values at home because I was so burnt out from fighting the fight at work. Um, and I looked at my husband and like, I don't have a plan, but I can't keep doing this. I need to get out. I'm a terrible employee, is what I kept telling myself at least, right? I need a chance where I can thrive and be on my own and build the kind of environment where I'm going to be successful. And he looked at me and said, I'm worried as hell, but you've got 6 months, figure something out. We can do that. Well, that was about a year ago that, he kind of gave me like, you got 6 months. And I'd already had this idea for Gluestick kind of banging around in the back of my brain. Mostly because I also value creativity so much. Like my mom was a serial entrepreneur. She owned a craft store when I was my daughter's age. So I grew up like in the back room helping her stock shelves and making the kids crafts that she would teach to other families, right? That was my childhood. And it was very important to me that our daughter also learn to value creativity. And there were so many days where I was working at that former corporate job where I'd be stuck in back-to-back meetings. She'd have a day or an afternoon off of school, and I'd be like, Carl, like, please go do something with her. And I'd be done, and I'd find him on his phone and her on her tablet, and nothing creative had been done. And that was an incredibly frustrating thing for me. So my goal is, well, how can I use this technology that she already is engaged with, that she already wants to be on, to instead of just entertain her and keep her out of the way, inspire her to do something more. And the more that I thought about that problem, the more it really felt like this is my way of giving back to the world, right? This is my way of helping that next generation have the values that I do. Um, and I can build a company in a way that I would be proud for my girls to work at, right? That's what I want someday for them. So that was kind of where it got the start. So since then, I've been working almost full time on it. I do a little bit of consulting on the side because I got to pay a few bills. But we just launched on December 21st officially to families. We're growing every day. I can officially say I doubled my user count last week. I mean, it was doubling from 3 to 6, but it's still doubling, right? Take the wins where you can get them. Um, and I'm just really, really excited for where the business is going, and for the fact that like I'm getting a lot of recognition from the local startup community here in the Twin Cities, who are seeing what I'm trying to do, who are seeing that I'm building this values-based business and coming out of the woodworks to help me. And I think that's like the other thing too, that when I look at the other business leaders and some of the local programs and things that I've been through, you can tell the leaders who are like, oh, I thought this was a really great business opportunity and I'm doing it for the money. And the people who do this because they see this business as a way to give back to the world.
Mm.
One of those types of businesses are the ones that everybody kind of like flocks to and like, hey, I want to help you. Hey, how can we partner together? The other are the founders who are running around, like throwing their business cards at people and trying to chase leads that never materialize. And I'm proud to be in the other camp, right? And I think that that's going to be a real key part of the success that I'm confident we will see.
I hope that you, Abby, could put the link to the app in the chat so people can download that before you leave.
Absolutely. Just it's gluestick.app.
What advice would you have for other women who are here and might be feeling called to rise up as a leader and join the Women's Leadership Challenge, but might be scared or worried about spending the money or whatever that is? What advice might you have for them?
I think the biggest thing I'd say is that you're the only person who's going to take a chance on you, right? Like you can't sit back and wait for someone else to give you the push. The push has to come from the inside. And if you're here, you clearly have something that's pushing you. So listen to that voice. Listen to that little nagging thing inside that says you're not where you're meant to be, and go pursue whatever that is, right? Because like Sam said, I was so unfulfilled, even though I was working at some of the biggest names in tech, right? I hated working at Google half the time because it wasn't anything but trying to make more money for already rich white men, right? I don't want to make more money for rich white men. I want to do good things in the world. And if that's you, then figure out how you're going to do that. And to me, the biggest help that I have seen and gotten in the last 5 years is finding a community of people who believe that women can do that and that women can reach a hand down and help pull everybody else up along with us. I think so often we're just in our own heads, right? And we've all had bad experiences and we don't know how to find that community. And finding the community is legitimately hard sometimes, depending on where you are in life, right? Sometimes you're just surrounded by a bunch of toxic people. This is not a toxic group. This is like the most empowering and helpful and legitimate and authentic group I've ever been a part of. And it has, like, it sounds cliche, but it did literally change my life. I would not have had the courage to go out and try. This is my third business. The other two failed miserably. I wouldn't have had the courage to do it again if I didn't have Sam and everybody else from my cohort whispering in my ear, being like, yeah, like you've got what it takes, Abby. Just do it. Just take the plunge. So I hope that I can be the one whispering in your ear, you've got it. You need to go take the plunge too when you all join our text chats and we all cheer for each other.
Thank you so much, Abby. It always makes me blush to hear that. And one thing that is I try to do with the Women's Leadership Challenge is to have we still have like a WhatsApp group and networking with the alumni because there's about 100 plus women in the alumni group from all over the world. I think 36 countries now. And Abby, what really stands out to me again, like as values-based leadership, right? Going back to that feminist structure. And I know that you also are. One thing I really love about Abby was when she gave a public speaking engagement and she talked about a poop diaper, and humanizing motherhood and that women are. I mean, I'm not a mom, but there's a lot of women who are mothers, and that's there's so much stigma and weirdness, and you have to separate your personal and your professional life, and I love that Abby bring that kind of mother, that caring aspect of you that doesn't have to be a mom, but definitely is a piece of you. So thank you for coming today and for speaking with us.
Happy to, and happy to answer any questions anybody's got as well.
Thanks, Ab. So I just want to thank everyone. We're already 5 minutes to the top of the hour. I just want to thank everyone for spending your time with me today and thank Abby. And I hope you've gotten a lot out of our session together. It's just a privilege to share the space with you, to see insights, energy, breakthroughs. I love seeing women from different countries here. I love seeing my alums. I miss you guys. I genuinely care about each and every woman that does this class, and I really care about each of you. And it's just good to see Leslie and Beth and Abby. So, if you feel totally confident moving forward from here and you're ready to take what you've learned and crush it on your own, I want to celebrate it. You're amazing. And I appreciate you being here. Like truly, you've got this. But if you're feeling fired up and you feel like there's so much more potential to unlock and you're thinking, I don't want to have to figure this all alone, it would be so much easier with a coach and a community and awesome women around me and a kick-ass feminist leadership curriculum that exists literally nowhere else because I've looked at all the programs, they're all made for corporate America. Then think about joining the Women's Leadership Challenge or at least booking a call. We can discuss if it's the right fit for you and if it's the right stage of your life. And you'll gain strategies, tools, community coaching, and accountability to really transform your leadership journey and achieve those big outcomes you've been dreaming of, like starting your own company. So it's about taking what we start in these classes and really turning it into a long-term success story and transformative impact. Like I mentioned, we start with a 360 review where you get feedback from all these different people on your leadership strengths and areas of growth. We go through that together. Then we, go through stages, deconstructing your past and the patriarchy, learning strategies to advance in the current world, your intrinsic power map. We really go deep on these feminist leadership principles and how do you make them actionable? How do you foster change? We do a session on finding your purpose, which is a really meditative session that I do with you. And you get a free mission and vision session with Leslie Zafran, who's also an alum, who's amazing. And then I match you one-on-one with other women either in other cohorts or in the alumni community to be able to collaborate, love each other, connect across borders, whatever that is. Like I mentioned, it's from a financial investment. It's $1,000 a month for 12 months. And if you choose to enroll during the Feminist Leadership Formula and do pay in full, I'm taking off $3,000. So it's $9,000 total. And I also offer payment plans. So I've had people on payment plans as low as $200 a month. I don't really care as long as you end up finishing the payments. And also, a lot of companies will pay for you to do this, even if they don't overtly say they have a professional development budget for you. Often they do, especially if you're in a male-dominated industry. If you go forward and ask for the financial investment and they want to keep you, they will pay for the program because it is a leadership program that has a certificate at the end. So again, if this is something that you want to explore, please feel free to book a call with me. It's in the chat. And I'll share with you how you can join a global community of incredible women like Abby and Meg and Leslie and Beth, who are rewriting the rules of leadership and making an impact on the world. So with that, tomorrow you're going to be hearing from Mariana Diaz-Kraus, who runs Movilizatorio, which is a social impact civic participation incubator. She's done amazing work changing government policies in Colombia and creating social change. And let's end with one insight from today's session. One insight, and then we'll close out. One insight you're walking away with from today's session. Feminine versus feminist. Start where you stand. Great. Yeah, I want her daughters to work at. Absolutely. Great, Zura. Amazing. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Again, tomorrow is the same time, 7 o'clock with Mariana Diaz-Kraus. And then Friday and Saturday are going to be at 1 p.m. Tori just sent along a really cool blueprint for our class on AI, which is on Saturday. And Sunday, we have a roundtable with some alums. So I'm excited to keep going with you all. And thank you for choosing to spend this time together with us. You really are the future that we need in this world. So thank you for showing up. Good night, everyone.